Greetings gamers, ex-gamers and friends and family of gamers. This is day 14 of Game Free January and so far nothing to report. I know, shocking. Sleep was fine, although I did wake up a little late, but not late enough to report it as problematic. I was tidying up and saw a game controller and thought nothing of it. I just tidied it away without even being tempted to play. So absolutely nothing to report. This brings me rather disjointedly to the topic of this video, which is availability. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, there is a strong link between ease of availability and increased use and overdose. This is borne out by my personal experience growing up in an age where the number of adults smoking was nearly 100% of the population. Access to multiple brands of cigarettes were available in every corner shop, and every high street had at least one tobacconist. There was no legislation against people smoking in the workplace, so people just smoked at their desks or wherever they worked. People who were out of work and relying on state benefits had a box on the benefit forms that they could tick which read, "Do you smoke?" Those who ticked the box were given extra money so they could pay for tobacco products. These days there is a lot of legislation around smoking, including strict age limits on when people are allowed to buy cigarettes, who is licensed to sell cigarettes, advertising of tobacco products is restricted, smoking is banned in public places, and taxation on cigarettes is making the habit less and less affordable for poorer people. There are some people alive today who have never even heard of a tobacconist. Currently in the UK, smokers have declined from near 100% when I was a child to just over 15.5% of adults aged 18 and over in 2016, which is down from 19.9% in 2010. As controversial as some of these measures were at the time, there is no arguing with the fact that they work. Whenever people talk about prohibition, we think of the catastrophic failure in the US of the prohibition on alcohol and the rise of the speakeasies, but people often fall into the trap of assuming the choice is binary, with a product either being legal or illegal. The increasing amount of legislation on smoking in the UK and other countries shows that the choice is not binary. There is a whole spectrum of legislative options that can range from an outright ban to completely unregulated. Something to be considered if you're thinking about taking sides in the should we or shouldn't we legalise drugs debate. Currently, experts are divided as to whether or not video games are even addictive. The negative effects problem gamers experience could be symptomatic of other mental health issues that may or may not be exacerbated by their gaming. This makes it difficult to justify legislating video games beyond the current age-appropriate ratings, which are mostly optional and parents can choose to ignore those ratings. Some governments have classified loot boxes in games as gambling, bringing video games that use purchasable loot boxes under the same legislative control as gambling institutions and online gambling websites. In January 2019, video games are nearly ubiquitous, with video games available on everything from PCs to mobile phones and even smart TVs. As such, it's hard to find anyone who has never played a single video game ever. This is quite analogous to the time where I grew up with nearly 100% saturation in the tobacco market, with tobacco products easily available and relatively unrestricted. Governments are only now becoming aware that there might be a downside to leaving the gaming industry to self-regulate. There is a trend amongst AAA gaming developers to move away from developing high-quality PC and console games onto mobile platforms because they can make more money with less effort, since the PC and console markets are fairly saturated and the technology is reaching the limits of its capabilities in terms of graphics. This is leading to a worrying uptick in reliance on free-to-play, pay-to-win business models that is funded by microtransactions that leave gamers spending far more money than they budgeted for. For those unfamiliar with the concept, instead of charging £50 or £60 for a game, the game is free, but you have to make in-game purchases, 50p here, £1.99 there. By the time your bank statement hits the welcome mat, you've probably spent over £100 because it's harder to keep track of lots of tiny transactions than one large transaction. Currently, the gaming market is near saturated and poorly regulated, creating a race to the bottom mentality among developers, with the most successful developers having the lowest scruples, churning out low-quality, unoriginal games while squeezing the largest amount of money out of gamers. What's happening in the gaming market is eerily similar to the illegal drug trade, with high-quality products sold to non-addicts to get them hooked, then gradually reducing the quality of the product and hiking up the price because the addict has no choice. For adults who are vulnerable to gaming addiction, the easy access to games and the lack of regulation is extremely concerning, although help is at hand if you have a problem with gaming. As gamers though, we are not entirely helpless. When Blizzard Entertainment announced that they had no intention of allowing flight in the Warlords of Draenor expansion, half their player base unsubscribed that same day, forcing the company into frantic backpedaling with a quick announcement that flight will be available after all. If, however, the unscrupulous trend in fleecing the gaming community continues, governments will be forced to introduce further legislation. Of course, parents of child gamers don't have to wait for governments to act. Parents can make use of parental control functions to stop underage children making in-game purchases and/or set limits on the time they're allowed to play. The ultimate power actually does lie with us, the consumer. Just as with the case of government legislation on smoking, we're not confined to a binary to game or not to game dilemma. We have a whole continuum of options, including limiting what games are allowed to be played and by whom, when they are played and for how long. You even have the option of allowing some games to be played without supervision, while others can only be played under adult supervision. In the case of children, parents are the final gatekeepers that determine what games are available and when they become available. If you feel that you might have a problem with excessive gaming and are worried that you might be developing an addiction, why not follow along or try out this simple test going game free for a month? Remember, it can be any month and you don't have to start on the 1st. Why not post a comment to let me know how you're doing, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. But as for me, big fat hairy 13 days and counting non-gamer, I'll look forward to seeing you in another video.